Hi, welcome back to the Trial by Identifier podcast series. I'm your host, Jennifer Butterfield, and today I am welcoming my new partner in YouTube series, Morgan Simpson, who is a Texas licensed realtor. And welcome, Morgan. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on today, by the way. I'm excited to be on. Um, sure, a little bit about myself. Like you said, I'm Morgan Simpson. That's my name. Um, I grew up in the Austin area my whole life, right? I grew up in North Austin in a little subdivision called Millwood. If you know about it, went to Summit Elementary, Murkison Middle School, and then we went to Anderson High School together, obviously. I got into, so graduated high school, was trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do, right? I knew I liked sales, and I had tried a couple different forms of sales, and I did quite well, but I didn't believe in some of the products, right? I mean, so one of my kind of a funny little thing. One of my first sales jobs was selling Kirby vacuums door to door,
Okay.
right? And the thing that I really didn't, in first day I sold two Kirby vacuums, made like $500, which was a ton of money for me at that time. But I left that day and I didn't feel great about it because I started putting the pieces together. It was like, so they pick us up and put us in a van and they take us to over to Killeen, right, where all of the military folks live out there for Fort Hood. And
Right.
what they were doing is they were targeting
Their,
the
their
wives,
wife.
the housewives of these
Yeah.
military guys, because the housewives were, sitting at the house and maybe didn't have anything to do or whatnot. They were manning the house. A lot of them had kids. And so you come and give this little presentation with this shiny new toy. And all of a sudden, before it's all said and done, you're selling them a $1,500, $2,000 vacuum. And I was just
Sucks.
so anyway, I took a little detour there, but so I did a bunch of different kind of sales gigs and jobs, and I waited tables even before high school. I mean, I started working at like 15, um, got into restaurants, really liked that, liked dealing with people and that kind of thing, but knew I wanted to get into sales. After I went through so many of those different jobs, I took a course. I had a new opportunity because I was trying to find where my path was in this. I knew I wanted to do sales and interact with people, but I didn't know what I wanted to sell or where. So I had an opportunity to do this car sales training course and whatever it was, right? So, and you had to pay to do this course. Looking back, maybe it was a scam, right? Because you're not supposed to have to pay an individual like that to go work for them. But so what they would do
Mhm.
is they would train you and then they would pair you with the dealership, and away you go, right? And so they did, and they paired me with a dealership, and I got hired. And before I even, you'll see my story is it's a lot on feel, right? If things don't feel right, I'll back out. So
Mhm.
before I even started my very first day, it just didn't, something fell off about it. Maybe it was the whole thing of the, used car salesman thing or whatever it was. It just it wasn't working for me. So I backed out of that and I started going to school to get my real estate license.
Great.
This was pretty much, right after high school. I was fortunate enough to figure out, okay, here's something that I can use my skills in and learn in and progress and maybe make a pretty decent career out of. So I got my license in 2009, right? And I just
Mhm.
started, I had to keep waiting tables because little do you know, you don't just get a real estate license and sell a house. It's
Right.
not, it's not how it
Right.
happens, especially
You have to
right
fill
now.
the
And especially back then in 2009 as well, because the market was still rough from the 2007, 2008 crash, right? So I
Yeah.
started doing that. And so I started doing leasing, apartment locating and leasing because look, I was 19. I didn't have a lot of friends who were buying houses in my, my peers. So I started doing that. I learned the ropes and I just hung in there and I stuck with it. And I realized, hey, there's really something here. I enjoy this. Let me see if I can do this for a living full time. And it took me, to be honest, it took several years of, keeping a restaurant job, going down to, I remember the first step was like going down to only 3 days a week at
Mhm.
waiting tables. And then it was two, and then it was one. And then it was like, okay, what am I doing? I'm getting in my way of taking that step and taking the leap of faith to get going. So once I finally did that, things kind of took off. I didn't have that thing to fall back on, right? And I had to
Right.
get serious about the business. And then from then to there, it's just been a long journey that I've enjoyed quite a bit.
Oh my gosh. I first of all, I didn't know kind of the background like with the vacuum sales and then waiting tables and things like that. It's funny you bring up the 2008 housing crisis. Obviously, that's very relevant in this conversation of you being a realtor, but for those listening, Morgan and I went to high school together. We went to LC Anderson High School, and I was 2 years behind him. So he graduated in 2007, and I was
Right.
'09. So it was smack dab in the middle of when I was a senior and you were just getting out of school that happened. And I remember it was like the year before I was able to vote. And I remember like seeing headlines of like college grads can't find jobs, like hundreds of thousands of college grads can't find jobs. And like I was supposed to be applying to go to college at that point, and so I those are some distinct memories from that time. And yeah, my mom has been teaching real estate and been a realtor in Austin for 30 years too. And I remember because she talks to students a lot and she's like, it takes a minute, but you do have to
Right.
take that leap of faith. So I love hearing about that. And, I ask all of my guests this question and I'm curious. I'm going to ask it to you too. What was the conversation around personal finance like in your home growing up?
Yeah, sure. I actually that's a thing my dad did really well in our house as far as managing your money. Being,
Mhm.
he was always a penny saved is a penny earned kind of guy. I mean, I don't know how many times he told me that, but so much to where to get an allowance, we would have to invoice him to get our
Are you
allowance.
kidding?
Yeah, no. I mean, he would want us to, and sometimes it would come with, some stipulations of like, hey, you have to do some task, right? And then you have to spell those out
Yeah.
and present an invoice to him, and then get an
Wow.
allow get your allowance from the invoice, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's one of those things that's a little ingrained in me to not, be too frivolous with money or overspend or and me and him probably have different business philosophies now, but that was a good starting base to kind of keep me a little more grounded because I'm more of an optimist. I look at like bigger picture stuff, scalability, and that kind of thing. But look, you can't spend more than you make at the end of the day.
Right. That's right. Always bring
Yeah.
in more than you're putting out. Exactly. I love hearing about that. First of all, that I've never had a conversation with anybody or a guest come on the show or even heard of anybody who had their kids invoice them, but way to go, dad, because that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so you talked a little bit about kind of the transition into real estate, but I'm curious, was there like, I know it sounded like, you just didn't get a good gut feeling with the used car sales training and stuff, but was there any like particular moment or experience that happened or memory that you have where it was just like, okay, I'm gonna go get a real estate license?
You know, it's I'll be 100% honest because it's a little it, part of it was a little superficial because I
Uh-huh.
thought, hey, look, I know I'm good at sales, and I learned
Right.
that I was very effective at sales, even in restaurants, right? Because restaurants, a lot of them would have sales competitions where we would be pushing certain appetizers or desserts or all that kind of stuff. So I kind of knew that, hey, look, in school, I was never great in school or a great student, stuff like that. But I was like, hey, I found something that I'm actually pretty decent at that I could maybe use for a lifetime. And I thought about it and I was like, well, what's the most expensive thing I could sell? Right.
That's the thought that comes to my mind, right? It's like the right, real estate. There's literally that is it, right? I
Right.
It's so
And I
funny that you
wanted to
said
help. Look, I wanted to help people. I think but I don't know that I even knew as much that that was my motivation yet. Keep in mind, I'm 18 when I'm first making that decision. So
right,
I'm pretty immature and just probably thinking more of the superficial side of things. But as I got into it, and through the years, I started to figure out what the rewarding side of real estate for me was. And looking at the different things where, I would help some clients and make so much more money, but then I would help other clients make less and it felt like so much more. Like I got something from it, and I was like, "What is this thing here?" Right?
yeah,
And as you, the thing about like chasing a career or anything for money, you find out. Sometimes it takes people a long time to figure this out. I was fortunate enough to find it out somewhat quickly that you're never satisfied with the level you achieve if you're chasing money. It's a
right,
hollow pursuit. As you always think like, oh, when I make that first $10,000 commission, I'm gonna feel this way, or 30 grand or 40, and then you make them, and you're like, I see it's cool to see the stuff go up in the bank account, but I don't feel any different at all. Right.
right,
But through it, you notice, like I said, those other deals where when you literally have a client who's calling you crying of tears of joy, right, where
right.
you're affecting their life, and it may sound hokey or whatever, but you know, it, you got to not have a heart or a soul to not feel something from that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I started to realize like, hey, there's some redeeming qualities here that will keep me coming back to this, that'll keep me fulfilled in this career. So I think the reason why I gravitated to it at first was not the reason that ended up making me stick around.
I really love hearing that because as a child growing up in my mom's home and like seeing her help clients all throughout my childhood, there are people that we still keep in touch with, they had kids and we've kept in touch with them all these years. And I remember like her slogan, I think, was like the best move you'll ever make. And really, you're helping people find their home. And like, what greater sense of security comes from like getting a home together, right? And
Right.
for a lot of people, and I think this may be a good segue into this next pivot of the conversation, but a lot of first time home buyers, right, are starting a family for the first time, or are newlyweds, or are thinking about making these big life decisions, or have worked really hard to I mean, some of them come from nothing, right? And then like save and then get to a point where they're in a position, right, through hard work, planned effort, and determination to start moving forward and buying their first home. And so I just think it's so neat because it is such a personal experience on the residential side. I'm sure the commercial side has its nuances as well, but I love that you shared it's like an acquired purpose almost. It was like we're
Yeah,
not exactly
absolutely. And I mean,
right,
if you think about it, like a house is a structure that you're going to do a lot of things in, right? But a
right.
home is more of like it's almost a living entity, right?
It
Like
is.
a home has emotion tied to it, it has
Oh yeah,
memories in it. It
totally.
has like, and this is an undeniable fact. I've seen it with buyers, left and right all the time. they'll walk in and say, "Hey, I don't like the feel," or "I love the feel of this
Yeah.
home." They have a
Yes.
feel to them, right? So, and it's not just the structure; it's obviously greater than the sum of its parts. It becomes this whole new, different thing. And to just be like, look, I'm not trying to say that we really have much part of that of their life, but to have one little tiny minuscule part of helping them get the house that they're going to make a home, yeah, that's pretty rewarding. It can be with the right
Well,
people.
yeah, I just love that you've identified with that sense of purpose, and I know how meaningful it can be because I've found that sense of purpose in the work that I'm doing. And one of the reasons why I'm super excited to have started working with you and also to have you on the podcast is because my very first episode that I launched was a friend of mine who was a first time home buyer, and she had just bought her first house. She, you know, saved her money, lived really frugally, and then bought her home, and has renters, in it, and also talked about the whole process. And so, I think it's cool to have her as the buyer, but from the perspective of having a realtor on the show to talk a little bit more about, I mean, this is your specialty, right? This is your profession.
Right.
So I'm curious, can you walk us through some of the biggest challenges that you see people when they are renters facing when they're on the road to becoming homeowners? So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. The first one is getting started, really. I mean, because it's a lot of, and look, I'll use the term fear just in this sense. It's not that you're actually scared of buying a home, but you're scared of kind of what's lurking in the shadows of something you don't know about, right? And we all do that. We all have that. So if you're not super versed, and how could you be if you've never bought a home, it's going to be kind of intimidating and scary to even start the process. So that's where I see people stumble first, between wanting to buy a home and then doing anything at all about it and knowing what that anything should be. So we get into that in depth, in what we're going to talk about a little later. But
Hmm.
it's one of those things where you're kind of paralyzed by not knowing what to do, and you're looking for an excuse not to do it, because it's not necessarily an easy process. This is a life changing event, right? Buying a home for the first time, it really is. So that's where they first stumble in, not knowing what to do, or putting it off and not getting pre-qualified with the lender,
Right.
not calling their trusted real estate advisor or their agent. um, that's the first real huddle, from there, hurdle, I should say. And then I think, it depends on the market after that. Like, so if you ask me the last 4 years where people have challenges, it would have been being in situations where there's multiple offers, right? In dealing with that market where, some buyers are offering, damn well their firstborn child
Right.
as a bargaining chip, right? So that's another thing in that particular market people really struggled a lot with. And then there's a common theme in all this, and it's the emotional roller coaster of the process,
Right.
right? You start out and you're a little unsure. You get to the point where you're pre-qualified, you feel better, you feel optimistic. In that really hot market, you start looking for homes, you see some you love, you are feeling really excited, and then you get that letdown of, oh no, there's multiple offers. Oh no, we missed out, right? Or oh no, we got beat by someone else who's willing to just pay, 100,000 above list price or whatever it is.
Right.
And
Right.
so I saw a lot of that for people, and some people would stick with it, and some people would decide to, hold off or quit, right? And I
Yeah.
totally understand it, because it's got to be, look, it's frustrating from a professional side. it's got to be 10 times that from a personal side, because you are looking at where you're going to live and you start envisioning yourself in this house and all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the pitfalls. I think getting to the dance, if you will, right? Getting set up where you can actually look at the houses and you're pre-qualified and you're ready to go. That's everyone's first big hurdle. And then depending on your market is what's going to dictate your next biggest obstacles.
Mm-hmm. And, I want to just mention, and we'll kind of go into the inception of this series here in a moment, but, I think one of the things that I totally relate to and what I've heard, with when I have clients that are like in a position, it seems like to move forward with, making a purchase, a lot of times they're like, there's like this belief, maybe nobody in their house has ever, or nobody in their family has ever owned property, or they just are not sure how to go through the process, like the terminology is something that they're not familiar with. And so um I want to talk a little bit about the intention behind the series, and I'll kind of share my end of how all of this came to be, and then I'll turn it over to you, and feel free to give like your story about it. But I launched Trial by Jennifer back in June of this year, end of June, and it was, a response to wanting to be in business with myself and also to help educate people on financial literacy and money transparency, and like giving people the tools to understand money. If they didn't come from a household where their dad was asking them to invoice him for an allowance, and I think too, there's so many different facets. Personal finance affects every single area of our life. Like everything can be related to it. And I had made a post about it, and Morgan and I had been connected like throughout the past decade or so. But he reached out, and we scheduled a phone call, and we ended up talking about some ideas, and one of them was the first time homebuyer series. And so I'm curious, feel free to like fill in any other parts of that story, and then we can kind of talk about what the intention of the series is, and the inception of it, kind of where we were coming from with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I had kind of been pushed to do video previously, and to be honest, I didn't want to do it. I was resistant to it because not our series or anything, right? But just like get
Right,
on
no, I get
video in general,
it.
and because I was kind of one of those that's like, look, I became a realtor to sell real estate and represent people and help folks not become an influencer kind of thing, right? Almost.
Mhm.
So I pushed back on it early on, but then it kind of just kept coming up, right? And I kept getting people tell me it's something I should do, and it just kind of kept resurfacing. And then flash forward to not all that long ago, I'd say maybe a year ago, um, I really started to think about, okay, I love talking to people one on one, but I'm noticing that I've got this acquired knowledge through the years. Not that I'm anything special. It's just I've been doing this for 15 years. I've got
Right,
this knowledge that I'd really like to share with more people. And I still, like I said, I still do one on ones. I still talk to people every single day, but it's just not near as scalable
right.
to go one on one. You just can't reach near as many people. So I finally started to think, well, okay, it's not the video aspect. Maybe it's the types of videos that everyone's doing that I don't really like. I didn't want to just sign up and hey, this is what realtors do. Do this video, look at it, and read this script and call it a day. Like I wasn't. I'm not into that. So I thought, well, what if there's something that I can actually enjoy, right? And I can feel like I'm putting this out there to help other people. I'm not putting it out there to self promote or do those influencer-y things. So I started to think about that, and things were coming along, and I tried a couple different things. And then one day you actually had posted something about helping clients and maybe doing consults and stuff for free, right? And when
Mhm.
I saw it, the first thing that goes through my head is, look, I'm seeing something. Is there a value here for my clients? Is this a service that I can bring in that will bring more value to more of my clients, to be able to give them something for free, right? Essentially. And I reached out to you and was like, well, hey, I was just kind of curious. We set up a call, we started talking, and then I don't even know how it turned into a video series. I don't think either one of us planned that at all. It was kind of just organically like, all right,
Yeah,
well, you're doing this thing. I kind of want to do this thing. Maybe we put them together,
right.
and we started chatting and stuff. I don't think we had really talked in depth since like high school or right after that. So it seemed like we had a good rapport and everything. We're like, let's do this thing, right? And
And
so
I
we just started.
It was seamless too. I mean,
Yeah.
I look back on it, for those listening, we've been recording videos probably the past couple months now, and
Yeah.
it just came together effortlessly. And that is for me, I don't know, that's the way I've always done business is the path of least resistance, if you will. But
hmm
yeah, I think that, one of the things that I remember from that phone conversation was that we both have a heart for like the small guy, right? Like
Yeah.
not the corporate banks that are buying up properties or people who have like a whole investment portfolio, which we may get to a series about that because we want to include them too. But, we're thinking about our target audience and also just like what we have to offer in terms of educating people and where we want to help them get a leg up in life. And I think too,
Yes.
like, um, as I mentioned earlier, and something Morgan and I both identified in the first call and when we were creating the series, was that we want to demystify home buying, right? And
Yes.
make it less scary, make it more digestible. And so yeah, the way we've done that, we've broken it down into like 10 different episodes and we're almost done filming. And I'm curious, what is it that you want viewers to know the most about this particular series?
Yeah, I want them to know that they can tune in. They can start with one, and if they make it through all 10, if we're entertaining enough, or we give you enough value, or whatever it is, and there's no sales pitch coming here, guys. Like this is just something we're putting out. But
Right,
if you can. Even if you can like go through the highlights of all the episodes aren't long. I think the longest one is maybe 30 minutes. They're all 20 to 30 minutes. We try to get right to the point. But I think what I want people to know is you can come and listen, and I think you're going to feel, 10 times better about
right,
starting the process just by listening to these 10 episodes. You'll know what it's going to be like when you start out. You'll know what the first steps are, literally step from step. You'll know what to expect when you're looking for a home, how to figure out what you're looking for, how to make an offer. Um, Something really crucial is we talk about a couple things to watch out for and
right,
stuff that usually can slip through the cracks. And then the other thing too I want people to know is think about it this way. When you're in the middle of something, right? Let's say like a good analogy would be a football game, right? If you're a football fan or whatever sport you like to play, if you're playing that sport, you're not able to see everything going on necessarily around you in the moment, right?
right,
And you don't necessarily like that's why you have a coach. That's why he has several coaches under him because
right,
you have different people focusing on different aspects of the game. And so if buying a home essentially could be gamified, if it is a game, you would want to you'd want to practice ahead of time. You'd want to, I mean, football players, NFL, they watch a lot of film too, right? You'd
Yeah,
want to know some of these concepts ahead of time because by the time you're in the middle of it, it's real and it's emotion tied to it. You want to hopefully have already thought through it a little bit. And
right.
so I truly think with this series, you'll at least gain that. So you'll get a far more understanding of the basics and outline, and then we will prompt uh, some items that you may want to think about before you even start the process.
Totally. And I want to speak a little bit to the name of the channel, which we started this series and then we're tossing around different ideas, brainstorming. And for those of you who have been, listening in for the podcast and with the platform Trial by Jenna Fire, FIRE is an acronym it's a personal finance community and movement that stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. And so we wanted to kind of do a play on that. And so the last two letters of that acronym are RE, which also happen to be the first two letters of Realty. So we went with Fire Realty, and I think it's super clever. I was surprised that nobody had that Instagram handle or YouTube channel name or anything like that. But it's going to be its own thing. So we're really excited about the launch for it. And I'm also curious, Morgan, like if you could give us and I guess this is gamifying it, right? A highlight reel of the series. Can you kind of walk us through what viewers and audience members can expect if they're tuning in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to start with where you would start in real life. We give you essentially an option of step one. So there's a step one and step two. They're kind of interchangeable,
Right.
which this will make sense as you tune in. So we're going to start right where if a client called me and said, "Hey, look, I want to buy a house. What do I do?" That's essentially where we start, and we fill in the blanks and we give you some details and everything on things to know for those first steps. From
Mhm.
there we move on to things like, okay, so let's say you have a pre-approval with the lender and you don't have a realtor. How do you choose a realtor? Where do
Right.
do you just ask your mom or your dad or your aunt or uncle or your friends, or and maybe that's good to start out, but then how do you know they're going to be right for you moving forward, right? And hopefully we give you some information in that so that before you're already in the middle of it, and then it's kind of almost too late to back out of the situation. So we move from that, we go all the way to, all right, so the goal is finding a house. How do you figure out what house you should be looking for? There's a lot of houses
Right.
out there. Where do you start?
Right.
We move from, let's say you found the house, what's going to go on next, right? People
Yeah.
don't know, hey, I love this house. Can we buy it? If you've never bought a house before, you don't know what that's going to mean. So we talk about that. And then we also will take you from offer to acceptance, right? Offer, counter acceptance, you're in contract. We walk you through something called due diligence of the process where you're doing all your research and inspections on the house. We give you tips on what to watch out for and what to look for, how to, a lot of this too is like how to categorize it in your brain, right? Of what are you looking for? What are you thinking about when you're going through this process? Because there's a million things going on, right?
Sure.
A really good analogy, if anyone's ever been to a wedding, and especially if you've had your own wedding, right?
Right.
Um, so people will tell you this, and if you haven't gone through it, you're like, okay, whatever. But it is totally true. When you get married, you're very, you're nervous and everything leading up, but like once it starts, it goes by like that, and you have kind of no idea what's going on around you. You're in this little bubble, and so there's a reason that people have, and same thing with your parents and your loved ones and your friends. They're all kind of compartmentalized a little bit too because they're trying to do their roles and that kind of thing. But so that's why people hired wedding planners, right?
Right.
because they know they need someone to see the whole landscape and say, hey,
Sure.
I know where we are. I know where we're going. I know what to avoid. Hey, I know that you told me that your Uncle Jim over there gets a little whatever on the whiskey. So I know how to watch
Right.
out for it, like
Yep.
all those kind of things. And there's a similarity there when you're buying a house. And it's not just one day. I mean, buying a house is a multiple month process a lot of times. So, and emotions are just as high in a lot of cases, right? So, anyway, we show you through that process what to focus on, how to get through the due diligence, how to get through inspections, what you should care about, you should really focus on, and then we take you all the way to closing. We give you an idea of what that's going to be like, what you can expect, so you don't have to fear that process either. And then we're also going to get into a little bit of stuff of like, all right, what should you set yourself up with after closing for the first year moving forward of home ownership? So
Mm,
again, I would like to say it's a pretty comprehensive overview of the entire process.
I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say, like, I've learned a lot. I mean, growing up in a home where my mom was a realtor, I mean, has been for 30 years. I learned more from our series, I think, than I had learned growing up, like hearing her negotiate or like, going on open houses and things like that. But I think it's very fascinating and I think it's super important work. And I'm really excited for the launch. And I'm curious, because this is personal finance for the podcast and career development, but for this episode, specifically personal finance. I'm curious, and we talk a little bit about this in the series, but if we can just kind of expand upon what you might think some important qualifications are to prepare financially to enter the home buying market for the first time.
Absolutely. There's a couple ways you can go about it, but I think going directly to a trusted local lender and applying, even if you know you have bad credit, you don't have money for a down payment, you don't have anything prepared, great. That's a good place to start. Start there, see where you're at, get everything out on the table, and then start following the personal finance tips that you give out. Get with somebody like that where you outline a budget, right? Like, let's say you know that you're not there, you need to save up a certain amount of money. Here's another mistake a lot of people think. Oh, I'm not even going to call my realtor or lender yet. I know I need to save 20% down, and I got about 10%, but no, don't do that, because you have no clue what kind of financing you're going to use to buy that house, right? And so you could use FHA that's 3.5% down. You could use a down payment resource program that's very little out of pocket, if nothing, for the down payment. So
Mhm.
I would say you start with, before you can really plan anything, you need to have all the facts that are accessible, get everything out on the table. And then from there, you can start planning your finances out. You can set that budget so that our credit's not here. We need to build credit. It's going to take us 6 months to a year. Okay, great. Let's have a plan to do that. And let's also have a plan to save up finances through that time.
Totally. I can't stress the importance of the budget, but really the biggest takeaway that I have like absorbed from having worked with you is don't wait until you're financially ready necessarily to reach out and start the process. In other words, those professionals like a lender, like your realtor, they're there to help first time home buyers shape up to get in a position where they can be pre-approved and move forward with looking for homes. But like I think a lot of times that can be added motivation, right? Because now you're working with somebody and you've got your eye on the prize and it's becoming real. But also, I mean, I think a lot of people and again, I've said this before, there's the fear, right? Or like the limiting belief. And I mean, people can put that off and put that off, and they may be well ready for the process to become pre-qualified. I mean, you got to ask questions, you got to stay curious, and utilize the resources available, right?
100%. Yeah. And look, there's a lot of really big investors and giants in real estate who love the idea of you not going through the process and remaining ignorant to buying a home. And when I have to qualify this, when I say you may be ignorant to the home buying process, that doesn't mean you're dumb or you're stupid or whatever. Like, I'm ignorant to a lot of things. It just literally means I don't know much about that area, right?
Right.
And anyone who's not in the industry or hasn't done it themselves, they're going to be ignorant to the process, because how would you know about it, right? I mean, you can read a book on this stuff,
Right.
and still you're only going to know so much. So I would say, yeah, remove that fear, remove that mystique, and go for it. You don't you don't wait till you get in shape to go to the gym, right? Like,
Right.
that would be a
That's
pretty silly thing to do.
right.
So you have to just jump into it and see what happens. And a lot of times, what happens is a lot better than what you thought.
Totally. Well, in financial discipline, it really is like working out a muscle, I
Yeah,
mean, as with all discipline in life, and making changes. And I think so many people go through life in a way where they just keep repeating the same cycles, right? And a lot of times they're the cycles that their parents had cycles about, and their parents, etc. And you think about it, and it's like, we have more resources and tools available at our fingertips in this day and age than ever before. And, I think there are so many people out there that are, and this just isn't even in real estate, it's everywhere, that are willing and able and knowledgeable to help. And I think too, like, knowing that has provided comfort to a lot of people who've taken that scary first step. And so yeah, I'm curious, you mentioned FHA loans, and I want to talk a little bit. Can you kind of expand upon some first time home buying incentives?
sure. Yeah, and just like with everything else, I have to qualify it that it's going to depend on your state, your market, and what's going on in that market, of course. But that's more of the reason to reach out to. And look, I'm not telling you to reach out to me. Call a local lender. I'm not even giving it. If you want my list of local lenders, reach out to me. I'll give it to you. But
Sure.
any lender that's worth their salt, I would say go local, because they tend to just give a lot better customer service and have more skin in the game and that kind of thing. But you know, um, you have to get started to see what opportunities are out there for you individually. There are things where there's first time home buyer programs. We had one. Was it last year or the year before? It was some clients, and uh, look, I love them for this, because they came to me and they said, here's the honest truth. Here's what we got. We don't have a whole lot of money to play with. We've got a couple $1,000s. We're not sure if you can buy a home for that. We don't believe you probably can, but let us know what you can do. We set them up with one of our preferred lenders. They got set up with a down payment assistance program. And then we ended up finding them a house that was a new build from a builder in a community they liked, and they liked the home and everything. And how the deal worked out, because the builder had their own incentives, right? They had closing costs they were covering. They had other literal like cash incentives of like, hey, we're giving you 15 grand to do whatever you want with, as long as
Right.
it's structured to where the lender is going to be okay with it. And so after all said and done, it was like, I think they had to come out of pocket like $1,000 to buy the house.
Oh,
After down payment assistance program and a program and the what are all the different incentives from the actual builder. So you just and look, I'm certainly not guaranteeing or promising that situation. It's all
right.
very individual, but it is possible. right? It's a possibility. So you don't know. Worst case scenario, most people with a credit score of 620 or better, maybe six, but let's call it 620 or better, can get what's called FHA financing. Well, FHA financing is only 3.5% down, which, look, is still a lot of money, but it's a far cry away from 20 or 25% down, right?
Totally.
So there are different things we can do. There's another lender I talked to the other day who, and these programs come up with some of these smaller local lenders. They get a package of money to lend out, earmarked for a certain packet or a certain loan program they're doing or whatever. And sometimes they'll get a certain amount of this money, and once it runs out, that program's over, right? And that's what this was, where they had a real 0% down. It wasn't through one of the state, first-time homebuyer programs or anything like that. This was an in-house 0% down program that you could do with, actually at the time, a pretty decent interest rate too. Now, that doesn't mean you're zero out of pocket, but that means you're zero for your down payment. And then we see how we can raise the additional closing costs and whatever else we need to move around and make it work. But there are all these opportunities, and it's just like anything else in life. You don't know if you don't at least ask for it. You got to ask and see what's available for you, because it might be something that is ideal. It might be something you would dream about.
Mhm. Totally. That's so inspiring too. I hope that anybody listening, you know, feels inspired, because I think a lot of people are really discouraged by the housing market and the way that, home prices have soared, but wage stagnation is, a very real thing. And it's not as hard as people may think, and so hopefully that provides some hope to any renters listening, or even, people who are thinking about selling and buying a new home, and I'm curious, and we're coming on the final frontier of this episode. Until we launch our series, then you can join us for that. But I'm curious, I know you are a homeowner, and I'm curious. Can you share a little bit about your own personal experience, of what it's been like for you being a homeowner?
Yeah, absolutely. So we own, the home we live in, and then we've got some real estate investments as well. So, I think we bought our first in 2013, if memory serves. And so it's been an interesting ride. Look, I won't lie to you and say that home ownership is a breeze. It's not. It is worth it. Most everything in life worth having or becoming or whatever is going to take some sacrifice, some work, but it's been worth it 100%. And look, I mean, part of this is just a timing thing that we were fortunate and everything else, but we have a pretty good amount of equity in all of our properties because of what we bought, when we bought, and what the market has done for us. Now, we've done some stuff too to increase the value, but a lot of the equity growth has just been being a beneficiary of the market growing. And real estate does that, right? I mean, real estate's in cycles. So my rule of thumb generally for owning a property is, as long as you didn't do something insane when you bought it, right? If you were just somewhat reasonable, even if you overpaid, but it was reasonable, somewhat reasonable, if you can hold that asset for at least 8 years, you'll probably make money on it at that point when you go to sell it, and almost for sure in a 10-year cycle. But so it's it's not something you should take lightly. Um, it's not something that doesn't come without headaches. I kind of, it's kind of a joke, but it is a reality. I'll tell friends of, like, the more real estate you own, the more poor you have to pretend you are, almost, right? Until you
Yeah.
have filled those, and I have, what we do is, like, we have different bank accounts for each property, and those accounts have several accounts linked to them. So you have like a savings, a security deposit, and a checking. Um,
Right.
but so, you know, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing, but it certainly can pay off big in the long run. So I think, before you even think about should I invest in real estate, that kind of thing, why wouldn't you want to own where you live? Having the ability to to set your future, so to speak, be in control of it. Because my thing, and I did the move around, rent things, be a roommate kind of for years, right? And the problem with that is, like, at any given time, once your lease is up, the seller or the owner could say, "Hey, look, I'm selling. You got to
Yeah,
move,"
right.
right?
There's a lot
So
of things, right?
it it gives you some freedom. It's like putting your money in a separate bank account that is ideally and eventually will grow in value. So it's a way to make your money work for you, even if that's just your homestead that you're going to live in. Um, and it gives you, I think a lot of people think, well, I'm tied down, I got a 30-year mortgage. It's like, well, those are pretty easy to clear. If you have equity in it, you sell it, you get your money out, you're done, right? So um but it does give you freedom, I think it
Yeah,
does give you an extra layer of freedom, because you can decide when, if you want to move from that house, right? I mean, you don't have to be told by a landlord. You don't have to also be restricted, as much on the pet side, right? If you have
right.
dogs, not every place is going to take dogs, or they'll have breed restrictions or
Right.
whatnot. So it's also a thing that you can have a little bit of pride, a little more pride in, right? Hey, I own this house. I'm gonna work on the yard. I'm gonna do some landscaping. I'm gonna, make these improvements, and they're going into something that I own, which I think is a psychological thing, and gives you a little bit more reward and pride out of. But yeah, there's pros and cons to owning houses. I won't blow smoke at you. It's not always the easiest thing in the world, but it has a huge payoff if you do it right.
Definitely. First of all, I just want to say I feel like this has been just another added layer of a wealth of knowledge, and better insight for listeners. And I want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I was joking with Morgan when we first got on to record that like it feels really comfortable because we've recorded like 10 episodes of this series already, which I don't think I've recorded anything with any of my other guests prior to them coming on the show. So it's been really wonderful. It's felt very natural, and thank you again so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, and for those of you who are tuning in next week, I'm going to be having Kevin Jarrett come on. He's the owner of Revival Restoration ATX, and he's going to talk about his business and how he has started like power washing and window cleaning, and how he has really scaled his business over just the past year, and it's really impressive. And I look forward to having him on next Wednesday at 10 a.m. And keep your eyes peeled for the launch date of our first time homebuyer series, and I will see you all next week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.